If you've got to this stage, things are going well. You've got your question. It hasn't been answered. It's a valuable question to answer to the counselling community. You've got your method. It's a method that you know you have the expertise to do. You know exactly what you're going to be doing and how it's going to run. You've thought about your sample and you think, actually, yeah, that's a population I can access. I've got a good plan in place for how I can recruit and how I can retain my participants to complete my full study. Things are going well. We're now going to get to a little bit more of the nuance of the detail. So, my question here is, do you have all of the stuff you need to do your study? Is there any specific equipment you need? Is there any specific technology that you need to be able to run your study? If money was no object, there's all kinds of research projects I could do, but I don't have the technology and I don't have the money to be able to buy the technology. So, you need to bear that in mind. One of the most common things that we use in our studies is measures. So, whether you're doing a questionnaire or maybe an element of your interview or an intervention, you might be measuring something, maybe anxiety, maybe well being, maybe mood. With all of these measures, there's a lot of things you need to bear in mind. Now, in some cases, you can create your own measure. Maybe you're looking at something that is so specific and unique, there's nothing out there already validated, and you have to write your own questions. That's not ideal because your own questions won't have been properly validated, tested in the field, made sure that they are good questions and are correctly measuring, reliable and valid questions that are measuring what you think you are trying to measure. So if there is a published, validated scale out there, a measure out there that you can use instead, I'd always recommend doing that. If you can't, then of course you have to design your own questionnaire, and that's absolutely fine. But if you can, find a validated questionnaire that's already out there in the field being used. Now, this brings with it its own problems. So I'm going to talk you through a few things that you need to bear in mind with measures. First of all, is the measure actually measuring the thing you need it to measure? Sounds really obvious, but sometimes I talk to students and they tell me their research question, and then we get so bogged down in the method and what their questionnaire is going to look like and the measures they're using. And then when I look back at the research question, it's like, but you're measuring anxiety and your research question is all about well-being. That's not right. You need to make sure your measure is actually measuring the thing you said that it was going to measure. If your questionnaire is about anxiety, then you need to have a research question that's about anxiety. Otherwise, why on earth are you asking them about anxiety? So make sure your questionnaires, the measures you use, are actually relevant to the study that you're doing. The next thing to factor in is, do you have permission to use it? Oh, this is a big one. And this applies whether you're using a measure, or maybe you want to use a video that's online, or you want to use some music, or you want to use some images or pictures. Anything that you are using, you must check that you have permission to use it. Now, here is a very, very important and critical point. The fact that it exists online does not mean you are allowed to use it. The fact that a scale has been reproduced in a research article doesn't mean you've got permission to use it. It just means it's available and it's out there. You need to think really, really carefully about whether you actually have permission to use something. So just because it's on a website doesn't mean you can download it and use it for free. In many research projects, scales actually come with a cost. You have to pay to use them. So you need to check this. It's not going to be enough for you to just say, well, I couldn't find anywhere charging me. It's there, so I'm just going to use it. You need to actually find a paper or a website from the original creators that says this is free to use in research. If you can't get a screenshot of that, then you need to be emailing those authors and asking for permission so that you've got an email that says, I have permission to use this. The same if you're planning on using a video or a music track or anything like that, you need to get permission to use it, or you need evidence that it is freely available. So think really, really carefully about that. Make sure that you have the appropriate permissions. You also need to think about language. So if you're conducting your research in Wales, then ideally you will have as much of your resources available in the medium of Welsh as possible. So you need to double check, is your questionnaire in Welsh? If it isn't validated in Welsh, then you might have to have part of your resources, maybe your information sheet, consent form, instructions, and the demographic questions in English and Welsh, but then the validated bit just in English because that's all it's been validated for. So you need to think about that and check. Likewise, if you're doing any research in another country, you need to check whether the measure has been validated in that particular language to make sure that you are covered. You also need to think about exactly how you're going to present that information and how you're going to analyze it. You're going to have to analyze this results. So it's no good just finding a questionnaire and going, oh, that looks great, I'll use that. What do the results look like when they come out the other end? And do you know how to analyze them? You're going to need to read those original papers and get a sense of how you analyze those results. Now, I promised I wouldn't get heavy in the stats on this, but it's important for you to be aware of the stats, aware of how you will go about cleaning the data, how you'll go about analyzing that data, and really thinking about how you will now engage with the data when it comes in. Do not leave it to the end. Don't leave it till you've got the data and then think, oh, darn, I made a mistake. I should have asked this question. I should have done it like this. I didn't do it right. Think about it now. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more when I talk to you in a bit more depth about creating questionnaires. But think about your measures in terms of how you're going to analyze stuff right now so that you've got a really good sense of it. Okay, so if you have your measures, all of the ways that you're going to be measuring things, you've got your equipment, you've got everything that you need to run this study, then we can start moving on to some more in-depth consideration of your design.